All right, so we have kind of been running a little late, and we should immediately get back onto where we last left off and make sure that we finish this book off, right? So, coming back to our chapter, we were reading that the Pallava Vimana influenced the Chalukyan style, but it was subjected to radical modifications. The horizontal arrangement of the tiers was retained, but the total height was reduced by making each tier shorter. In the later Hoysala temple of the 13th century, these horizontal lines slowly lost their emphasis under the overbearing effect of sculptural details worked on all the tiers. The rectangular molding of the early temples gave way to circular shapes, indented by tapering vertical ribs, each rib consisting of miniature shrines piled one upon another. The cubical form of the cell of the earlier structures gave way to a star shaped plan, thus lengthening the total wall space on the exterior and giving the sculptor added scope for ornamentation. The single celled shrine of the earlier period was developed into twin celled, sometimes a multi celled temple. There was evidently no strict rules about, since some of the best known examples of this style differ on this point. The pillars, ceilings, doorways, jambs, the capitals, the brackets, the walls, and the tower all received the minutest attention of the Hoysala builder, whose zeal was carving obviously subordinated architecture to a secondary role. The Chenna Keswa temple in Belur. The finest of the early Hoysala temples are the Chennakeshwara temple at Belur and the Hoysaleshwara at Halibid. The little town of Belur in the Hassan district of Mysore is barely 16 kilometers from the modern village of Halibid, which in its heyday was called Dora Samudra, the capital of Hoysalas. An inscription in the Belur temple says that the king Vishnu Vardhan, the virtual founder of the Hoysala dynasty, had this temple built in AD 1117 to commemorate his historic victory over the Cholas at Talakad. The Kesava temple, as it stands today, is undoubtedly an amplification of the original temple referred to in the earlier inscriptions, but the entire scheme with the cella, vestibule, pillared mandapa had been originally conceived, though its construction extended over two or three generations. Unlike the great Dravidian temple, this temple, like others of its kind, is dwarfish. The Vimana, however, is particularly conspicuous of its absence. The entire structure, 54.2 meters long and 47.5 meters wide, is raised on a platform about a meter high. Its plan conforming closely to the contour of the temple above. The Navaranga, or the pillared hall, has entrance from the east, north, and south, each of them elaborately carved and flanked by a pagoda like shrine in the miniature, and Dwarapala, or heavily guardians, over the east doorway in a projecting panel intricately carved, depicting the lion headed god Narsimha in the act of slaying the demon Hiranyakasipu. The workmanship of the oil, the jambs, and the lintels conform to the general standard of excellence for which the sculptured panels of the Kesava and the Hoysala temples are famous. The sculptures on the exterior walls, although elaborate enough, are not profuse and overladen with ornamentation as a halibut and Somnathpur. The railing on which the walls of the pillared mandapa have been raised is, however, subjected to a rich variety of carvings which rise one upon another is well defined horizontal panels. The walls on the railings are made of 20 perforated screens, all elaborately carved. These typically Hoysala screens remind us of the marvelously carved sandalwood and ivory screens for which the craftsmanship of Mysore are to this day famous. A feature altogether unique to the Kesava temple and not found in the later temples of this style is the series of sculpted figures subjected fixed slantwise on the exterior pillars of the main hall, and the below the heavy overhauling cave. They are popularly known as mother Madanika bracket figures, wrought in the most exquisite style ever. Tempted by the Hoysala artists, originally there were 40 of them, but 2 of them are missing now. The bracket figures give to the exterior of the temple a decorative element, the like of which we do not find in other temples. Look at this, the plan of the Channakeshwar temple, Belur. The interior of the main hall is pillared pavilion covered all round by perforated screen. This pillared hall is typical of Hoysala style, but like all others of the kind, its pillars are numerous and too closely set to make possible any spatial view. Some of the pillars are invariably all ceilings, and the stone beams are so heavily carved that the resultant effect is one of congregation. The onlooker is dazed by the unrestrained exuberance of carving, which are no doubt in the best Hoysala tradition. One of, uh, one of these pillars, which looks particularly fabulous, is an example of fantastic lengths to which these inspired Hoysala sculptor could go. The pillars, named Narsimha Pillar, has been subjected to exceedingly intricate carvings, the capital and the base not included. These carvings consist of repeating patterns of pillared niches running in horizontal bands around the shaft with a tiny image enshrined in each niche. Another pillar, known as the Mohini pillar, is likewise the product of a master sculptor. Section is star shaped, but the various tiers of the monolithic shaft are molded in different patterns, resembling a wheel, a bell, a pot, or a double umbrella. These are enclosed by 8 narrow bands of excellent scrollwork extending vertically from the base of the shaft to the capital. A tall, beautiful figure of Mohini stands on the ornate pedestal cut into the base of the pillar. Even in its presently multi-layered condition, this lithic representation strikes us as a priceless example of Hoysala sculpture. The 4 central pillars of the hall are adorned with bracket figures of extraordinary beauty and plastic finish. The theme in each case, a dancing damsel with heavy rounded breast and slim waist decked heavily in jewelry. An extraordinary feature of some of the pillars in the hall is that they are lathe turned. Enormous blocks of the stone were firstly roughly chiseled to required proportions and placed on a lathe and turned, while sharp chisels cut grooves in shaft resembling a series of rings or bell shaped moldings. By what mechanical device they were able to work a lathe with such a heavy material on it is not known. There is no doubt that the Hoysala builder laid great store by this process because it enabled him to produce pillars in great numbers. To match the exquisite beauty and the rich variety of its pillars in the central hall has ceiling which are no less ornate. Most of these ceilings are flat and consist of carvings of the conventional type, but the central ceiling is a work of considerable artistic skills. It has an octagonal base over which a low dome is raised. The dome is not, as in medieval European architecture, built of voussoirs with radiating joints, but a set ring upon a ring of worked stone is in an ascending order, the rings becoming smaller as they go upwards. All these rings are held in position by the stupendous weight of a heavy slab on top. The 8 corners, slabs, and ascending rings of stones extravagantly carved from the center hangs a huge tabular drop like pendant, and the flat face of the pendant is converted into an intricately carved panel depicting Narsimha in the act of slaying the demon Hiranyakashyapa. A word needs to be said about the main image of the Kesava in the sanctum. 6 feet high, the idol stands a pedestal about half its height, elegant in the proportion, ornate in details, and perfect in finish. This image is easily one of the greatest masterpieces of the Hindu iconographic art. The other examples of comparable beauty are those of Kappe, Chenengai, Raya in the same temple at Belur of the Janardana, in the Somnathpura temple, the Hoysaleshwara temple at Halibut. The Hoysaleshwara temple at Halibut, considered to be the finest achievement of the Hoysala builder, is also an incomplete structure, although its construction commenced in about AD 1118 like the Belur temple. It also lacks the superstructure if we are to judge Hoysala architecture by the standards which its builders set for themselves, then by the sheer extravagance and beauty of its sculptural embellishment. The Shiva temple at Halibut is easily their greatest achievement. The several other Jaina temples at the same place, each beautiful in itself, stand no comparison with the structure. The Hoysaleshwara is a twin temple, the two structures being almost of identical size and joined by their adjacent transepts. Though each of them is a structure of moderate size, 34.1 meters by 30.4 meters taken together, and along with the Nandi pavilion in front, they occupy considerable space. Like Hoysala temple, this temple is also built on a low platform. The exterior of the temple is split into numerous projections in conformity with the star-shaped plan for the structure. As we proceed from the entrance round in the exterior of the temple, an endless scroll of exquisitely sculptured panels unroll itself, bringing before our eyes an astonishing display of plastic art depicting divine and semi-divine characters drawn from the Hindu mythology. At the bottom of the intended walls are six horizontal bands of relief sculptures, each devoted to a repeating theme like the elephants, lion, legendary swans, or stories from the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Above these bands and covering the central space of the gallery are paneled after panel of figure sculptures, each about half the life size, and extravagantly appalled for the sheer wealth of sculptural embellishment and the incredible intricacy of carving. These are the few temples in India comparable to the Hoysala masterpiece. Likewise, the four doorways of the Hoysaleshwara temple are remarkable productions of the sculptural skills. The Dwarapala at the south and the southeast doorways are the large size figures wrapped in extravagant jewelry, so intricately carved that it gives the impression of being the work of master goldsmith. The lintel of the doorway, 3.6 meters long and the 0.9 meters wide, is also converted into a panel of intricate carvings. The interior of this temple, like that of the Kesabur temple at Belur, is not architecturally imposing because of the numerous pillars fixed close to one another. But each pillar is an exquisite piece of craftsmanship, beautifully molded, fluted, and ornamented. The capitals support the typical Madanika, the bracket figurine figures, most of which are missing now. Fluted. Kesava Temple, Somnathpura. A typical example of the fully evolved Hoysala style in the southern Mysore is the 13th century Kesava temple at Somnathpura. About 40 kilometers from the Mysore city, it is a three-celled structure, the shrines being asymmetrically placed around the main hall. The whole temple raised on a low platform, like the Hoysala temple, occupies the middle of a big rectangular enclosure, 65.5 meters by 54 meters. The north, west, and south sides of the enclosure have a continuous range of 64 cells with pillars in front, all raised on plinth about a meter high. The temple, being a combination of three shrines, has a cross-shaped plan, so homogeneous and complete that is cloistered sitting. It gives the impression of perfectly pre-planned structure. All the three shrines have the vimanas or the towers intact, the towers being divided horizontally from the base by a heavy overhanging cave. The plan of the Vimana conforms strictly to the star-shaped plan of the shrine, the vertical tapering of ribs being composed of miniature shrines, all elaborately carved. The intended exterior of the wall subjected to the same treatment of that of the Hoysaleshwara temple, with running friezes depicting elephants, cavalry, and stories from the epics. Above them are the panels devoted to the Hindu pantheon, with gods and goddesses being carved in high relief and with the same intricacy of the detail as in the earlier temples. The temple of Somnathpura is remarkable for its ceiling in the pillared hall. Each ceiling is a dome made of enormous slabs placed one upon another, the usual pattern in that of a pendant or a banana flower which hangs from the center. The pattern rises in concentric circles, diminishing as they go up and connected by radiating ribs. The effect is that of a highly ornate umbrella carved into an enormous block of stone. Besides these well known examples, there are several Hoysala temples of the 12th century in the northern districts of Mysore where the early Chalukyan style originated and flourished. These temples differ from the southern group in their plan treatment of the exterior walls, the shape of the towers, pillars, design of the doorways. Unlike their southern counterparts, these temples do not have the star shaped plan but are rectangular. The treatment of the wall surface conforms to the early style of the 7th century, being spaced out by pilasters. The embellishment is more architectural than sculptural. The Vamana is compromise between the early Chalukyan variety of the Pattadakal and the later Hoysala variety of southern Mysore. The doorways are two different. Instead of purely ornamental rectangular gateways, uh, rectangular as in the southern temple, and the doorway of the northern temple is an important architectural element. Um, with plaisters on the two sides and a bolded lintel and cornice above. Some of the earlier examples of the later Chalukyan style in the north are to be found at Kukkanur, a village near Gadak, and Lakundi, also near the same place. The temples show a shift from the scorous sandstone of the earlier days to the fine textured soapstone. What is a soapstone? Alright, this is soapstone. A new architectural feature developed in the later temples of the Dharwar district is the prominent projecting cave, often double curved in section or a straight projection, which gives the building greater protection from rain and sun. This enhances the dignity of its architecture. The Mukteshwara temple at Chanda Dampur on the banks of the Tungabhadra is an early example of this. The temples of Itagi, Lakundi, and Kuravati are several others in the Dharwar region, represent the culmination of the later Chalukyan or the Hoysala type in the North Mysore, AD 1100. The Mahadeva temple at Ittagari, about 34 kilometers from Godak, which is partly in ruins, may be regarded as one of the highly finished examples of this style. It consists of an open pavilion or mandapa enclosed hall with an antechamber and cellar, all grouped together in a beautiful harmonious structure. The temple is considerable size, measuring 36.6 by 18.3 meters and very well proportionate. The decoration of the exterior, which is more architectural than sculptural, is intricate but pleasing. The tower, which is multilayered at the summit, would be 12 meters high in its complete form. The open pillared hall at the eastern entrance, measuring over 15 meters across, is an exceedingly striking composition and enhances the architectural beauty of the whole structure. Some of these pillars are lath turned in the typical Hoysala fashion. The jambs and the lintels of the entrances are elaborately carved. The Kasishveshwara temple at the Lakundi is also an effective composition. It has two shrines at the two extremities, each with a tower whose final is missing. The ornamentation of the towers is bold and architectural. The doorways of the temple are considered to be the finest specimens of their kind in the Chalukyan style. A series of beautifully carved moldings framed the rectangular entrance, which is flanked by delightfully shaped pilaster. On the top is a molded lintel surmounted by a carved cornice over door, while a keystone carrying the sculptured panel of the Gajalakshmi adorns the top center of the doorway. At the bottom of both the sides of the doorway, each vertical molding starts with the motif of the sculptured figure, which is remarkable for its proportions and gracefulness. Another group of temples equally celebrated as examples of this style can be found at Gadak. They are dedicated to Tirukeshwara, Saraswati, and Someshwara and belong more to less the same period. Kadak. Kadak district कहाँ पे पड़ता है? Karnataka itself. The Tirukeshwara is a triple shrine temple and two pavilion in the line with the eastern and the western shrine. This was the earliest of the group, having been built sometime about 1000 AD and repaired late in the 12th century. Situated close to this is the temple of Saraswati, the goddess of learning and consort of Brahma. Though the temple is a sad state of the ruin, one can still see the beautiful pillars of its mandapa. These pillars are variously patterned, and the ceiling and the doorways are remarkable for their exquisite carving. This is the Indrapuri Hill, Sarvana, Belagula. This is the Jain Basadi, the Chandragiri Hill, Sarvana, Belagul, Gautama Colossal, Indrapuri Hill, Sarvana, 10th century, Chankeshwara Temple, Bello, 20th century general view, panel in the perform screen depicting King Vishnuvardhana holding court, Chankeshwara Temple, Belur. This is the Narsimha pillar in the pillared pavilion, Janakeshwara Temple in Belur. Girl with mirror, a bracket image of the exterior wall of Janakeshwara Temple, Belur. Dancing Saraswati, a pillar bracket in the interior by Janakeshwara Temple, Belur. Mohini pillar in the pillared pavilion of Janakeshwara Temple, Belur. The Hoysala Temple, Halibut, 12th century. Sculpture exterior, Hoysala Temple, Halibut. This is the friezes from the exterior of the Hoysala Temple, Halibut. Kesava Temple, Somnathpur, 13th century. Interior, Saraswati, Gadak, 12th century. Temples of Saraswati, Gadak. Unlike the southern country parts, the Hoysala Temple in the north Mysore are rectangular rather than star-shaped in the plane and bear close kinship to the early Chalukyan of 6th and 7th centuries. The 12th century example in the northern Mysore are really numerous and widely distributed, but the most interesting of them is the temple of Dodda Basappa at Dambal, 21 kilometers southeast of Gadak. While all the other temples of this period in this region have a rectangular layout, this temple has a star-shaped plan of Mysore variety. This entire structure, including the cella and the pillared hall, has a ciliate plan which is considered right up to the elevation of the building. The horizontal courses of the Vimana are intersected by vertical lines that take off from the star-shaped plan of the cella. The vertical tendency of building is made more vivid by the angular projections in the walls and the towers, which give an appearance of added strength to the structure and makes it look altogether pleasing. The large number of temples built in the later Chalukyan style, both in its southern and northern varieties, owed their patronage to the Hoysala dynasty. Like everything else in the field of art, this style of temple architecture had its days of glory and decadence. Scores of temples other than those described were built in all parts of the state between AD 1000 and 1300 during the last quarter of the 13th century. Signs of decadence became perceptible, and fewer temples are to be built. With the invasion of South India, Malik Kafur early in the 14th century, all these Hindu dynasties, the Hoysala, the Yadavas, and the Kakatiyas who had patronized temple construction so far were more or less wiped out from the political map. As a result, an unprecedented period of political chaos set in, which arrested the peaceful pursuit and all cultural activities until the establishment of Vijayanagara dynasty in 1336. From one on, South India came to develop a more humongous style of temple building, drawing inspiration from the Dravidian as well as Chalukyan temples. Temples of Kerala and South Kannada. From the elaborate temple complex of the Dravidian style and the ornate, exquisite temples of the Chalukyan, we come to an altogether different style of temples in Kerala, the state which now comprises the Malabar and the erstwhile princely states of Cochin and Travancore. The gobbled or the multiple roofed structures of Kerala built in the laterite stone, bricks, wood, and tiles present a completely different appearance from their architectural counterparts elsewhere in South India. Travancore, and southernmost district of Kerala, was the meeting place of both Dravidian and indigenous styles. Not only did the two traditions coexist here, but they continually influenced each other, while the influence of the Dravidian style is found confined largely to the extreme south and the southwest of Kerala. The Malabar district in the northern north had to retain the indigenous character of its styles to a much greater degree. While discussing the development of temple style, we have to reckon with the absence of example which can be chronologically strung together on a discernible thread of evolution. As Stella Karamarich observes, the Kerala type of building in Travancore is homely and almost dateless. The Dravida buildings are more stately and are subject to all changes of the styles which the development of a school of architecture implies. The typical Kerala temple or Srikoli can be square or rectangular or circular in plan, the structure being raised on a sokle, a plain or molded stone pedestal. The main building lies on the east west axis and is surrounded by a rectangular cloister. The roofs are by far the most dominant part of the Kerala temples, whether the structure is circular plan as in Srikoli at Thirumandi Kakkara 13th century or rectangular at Vaikom 15th century. The roof also conforms to the same principle. It is broad based, deep, and pointing superstructure resembling the thatched roof of the huts and houses commonly built in the Malabar. The temple rules are as rule covered with thin tiles. Great attention is paid to the construction of these roofs in the length, thickness, and the joints of the rafters being regulated by the rules laid down by an ancient treatise on architecture, Vastu Vidya. The roofs can be single or double. The Srikoli of the Trikoti Thanam, which belongs to the 11th century, is an example of the double roof. The sloping roofs preponderate in the architecture of the temple so much that the visible part of the walls below is about a quarter of the total height of the structure. Architecturally, this quality of the Kerala temple is not only the unique in South India, but altogether pleasing. It gives the effect of lightness to the solidarity of the low structures below and adds harmony to the entire composition by sheer simplicity of conception. The roof, as we have observed, take the shape of the plan of the structure on which they are superimposed. If the plan is circular, the roof becomes an enormous cone. Its open base covering a good part of the perpendicular wall is a broad, sweeping curve. The square temple has its steep, pyramidal roofs, being in appearance more austere and less impressive than the cone. The third variety is a rigid roof, a single or double. The ridge of the roof runs breadthwise and projects beyond the hip and terminating in a characteristic triangular gable end resembling an open attic. The roofs, whether conical, pyramidal, or rigid, are often multiple, 2 or 3 stories high, and on that account, not only add to the height of the majesty of the structure, but provide greater opportunity to the image carver to display his skill on and around the struts that support the roof. The rigid roof is not altogether peculiar to Kerala. Old reliefs and paintings belonging to the early centuries of the Christian era indicate that the architectural conception, which was mainly curvilinear, was prevalent in the central India and the Deccan. We find also that in architecture of the certain Himalayan regions, especially in Nepal and Kashmir, gabled or multiple type roofs have prevailed throughout the centuries, whether the material was wood or stone. A somewhat similar style of construction also prevails in Kathiawar, more akin to the Kashmir structure. The Kerala type is nearer to the Nepal, that of Nepal, although we cannot explain the affinity between the two types in terms of cultural contact between the regions, which are also separated by about 2,400 kilometers. An ancient Shiva temple at Bepur, a small seaport south of Kozhikode in Malabar, shows a remarkable similarity to the Nepalese double roofed temples, though late in the millennium these are the double roofed temples. Sri Koli at Trikotithanam, 11th century. Though the architecture of Kerala's temples is simple enough, the brackets, struts, and upright on the exterior and the ceiling inside the buildings are often carved into beautiful imagery. We see them in artistic ancestors of the wonderful wood and ivory carving for which the state is to this day renowned. The ceilings are often covered with the images of god and goddesses, not to speak of the walls and pillar bases. The Ramayana and the epic stories supply themes of the elaborate carvings of the panels and the exterior walls. Where the walls were of brick and mortar, the surfaces were often covered by mural paintings like a tapestry in which the buildings appeared clothed. Even the wood carvings are sometimes colored and made to merge with the paintings on the wall, the reminiscent of the cave temples of the Ajanta. That wall paintings constituted an important embellishment of the ancient temples in the South India. It's also borne out by many Dravidian examples, as the Kailashnath temple at the Kanchipuram, the Brihadeshwara temple at Tanjore, and most recent paintings in the Meenakshi temple at Madurai. Like the Kerala, South Kannada, west coast of the Mysore state, also some remarkable temples which resemble the architecture of the Himalayan region. The Jaina temples of the Mudabidri, 32 kilometers northeast of Bangalore, the earliest of which go back to the 12th century, are built of stone but are clearer copies of the wooden structure. The finest of the Mudabidri group is the Chandranatha temple, consisting of 3 halls mandapas, all connected and combined with the cellars which contain the image of Jaina Tirthankara. Built some time early in the 15th century, this temple has pillars which resemble closely to the Chalukyan order. Being turned out on the lath, the entire structure has a common multiple roof with open triangle gabelins. Similarly, we have noted that the indigenous style of temple building coexisted with the Dravidian style. In the southern part of the Kerala, the earliest extant examples of the Dravidian structures, Travancore, go back to the 9th and 10th centuries. That is about the time when the Cholas built some of their earliest temples in the Tamil country. The temples of the Vizinjum are similar to the early Chola shrines in Pudukottai. The buildings consist of square cellars with a solid brick superstructure. The walls, however, are made of brick instead of stone masonry. Superstructure in itself is a small shrine shaped like the Scottish dome. Modern Hindu temple, Mattancherry, Kerala. The typical Kerala temple is square, rectangular, circular in plan, and roofs take the shape of the plan and superstructure. The indigenous style of temples building coexisted with the Dravidian style of the 10th century. Sri Padmanabha Swami Temple, Trivandrum, Kerala, 17th century. The Gopuram, though built into Dravidian style, is Scottish and does not quite convey the commanding dignity of other well-known temples, Gopurams of Tamil Nadu. Pillars of Suchindram Temple, Kerala, 16th century. Wooden carvings from the old temple car, Suchindram, about 18th century. The Great Temple, Chindram Gopuram, belongs to 17th century. Central Shrine, Valyadai Dichampuram, 16th century. Among the early Dravidian temples in the Travancore, which resemble spacious halls rather than the cubical temple in the Guthna Swami temple at Kanyakumari, AD 1000, it is a flat roof and spacious interior and is entirely of stone masonry. The plasters, the roll cornice with its chaiter window, motifs and horn friezes above them clearly indicate the influence of Dravidian style. The most typical examples of the Dravidian style in Travancore is Suchindaram temple, complete with Gopuram, tank, and pillared pavilion. The temple belonged to the last phase of the Dravidian style, the Navratri Mandapa, and the Suchindaram temple, 16th century, is exquisite lithic translation of the conventional wooden structures of Kerala. All details of the original wooden models are carved on the ceilings and the pillars. The ceiling is not flat but a coffered one raised above the beams by bracket construction, which has the shape of four-sided collar ceiling. Another well-known example of the Dravidian style is the Padmanabha Swami temple at Trivandrum, which also belongs to the last phase of this style. One of the variety of Dravidian temples found in Kerala is the circular type. We do not find specimen of this type elsewhere in south. The temple at Niramankara, 14th century, is the elegant example of the variety. The entire temple is raised on a molded circular platform, and within the circular enclosure wall is built square cellars, leaving ambulatory passage all around. The shrine has a low superstructure of Vimana with a dominical final. In this, all the other similar structures, we find the fusion of indigenous Kerala style with the Dravidian motifs and method of construction. We also see in these Srikolis the evolution of the circular Dravidian Vimana, unknown to the Tamil country, where the um, architectural style originated. The extension of the Dravidian style to the Travancore from 10th to the 17th centuries accounted for the geographical continuity and cultural affinity of this region with Tamil Nadu. But in more recent times, we find some interesting example of the Dravidian style having been built far in the north, largely under the religious influence of the South Indian Brahmin, the Vishnu temples at Pushkar and Mathura, with their typical Dravidian gopurams and elaborate structures, complex are instances in point. They were built late in the 19th century. There is a temple at Vizhinjam, 9th to 10th century. Footnote: the Chalukyan style, so called because a Muslim by the name had put up a hut by and lived in it. Alright, I think we are done with yet another book. Thank you for staying put, and hopefully we are able to move on to our next book.